At least you're here.
Yeah, we all couldn't lock our car.
I don't know what everybody's excuse is today. Last week was 4th of July celebrations. I don't know where everybody is today. Mike is on in Seattle or Vancouver, somewhere, and we're not getting our email blasts. So I'm not sure what we're I'm gonna have to, I guess, try to collect everybody's email address, and I'll just put it in. I'll just put a multiple address, copy to everybody and send you a copy of the thing. Although today I copied Derek's song wrong. I sent out 214 for the closing hymn, and it's 114. 214. It's a nice Jewish shalom, but I don't know if anybody
Shalom, hallelujah?
Yes, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it before.
I can sing it if you needed me to.
Well, we'll do it sometime just for the fun of it.
Oh, it's Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, yes.
I don't know that one as well.
All right, welcome to First Universalist Church of New Madison. Beautiful summer day, the breeze is blowing, it's not too cold, not too hot. It's rain. I had 2 inches of rain over this last 4 or 5 days, and I just found out I have a roof leak, so that's what I'll be doing tomorrow, is working on that. Any announcements today? Anybody heard from Cecil? I guess maybe I need to go down and visit her.
Seems technical, or I just got home.
So, because we sent her a card and still didn't hear anything, so I guess we'll go see what's going on. Where's mine? Oh, I left it down. One thing I want to bring to your attention, is everybody aware of issue 1? There's some literature on the table back there, and actually I have a slide here, but we might as well do that right now. Issue 1. If issue 1 was a football game, Ohio State 59, Michigan 41, Michigan wins. Issue 1 is a constitutional amendment to the Ohio Constitution that you can't pass any constitutional amendment without a 60% approval vote. Right now it's 50% plus 1. So it's basically a majority means you can approve an amendment to the Constitution. They've changed, the Republican legislature is changing this, and the reason they're changing it is there is going to be a proposed constitutional amendment in November, which is already on the ballot, to make the right to choose legal and part of the Ohio Constitution. The conservative faction in the legislature does not want this to pass, and in every other state, Kansas, Kentucky, all these conservative states, it's passed every time. But it's passed with 55, 56, 57, 58%. So they picked 60% to make an amendment to the Constitution to be sure that there will not be a right to choose in Ohio. The really sad thing about it is, 2 months before this, they outlawed any election in August, any special election called for August, because like only 3 or 4% of the people vote, and it costs the same amount as when you have a November election. So it costs millions of dollars for hardly anybody to vote. But it turns out that if they wait until November, they would lose. So if they do it in August, and already in Mercer County and Salina and all the Catholic countries, the Catholic churches are registering people to vote and encourage them to vote yes on issue 1 so they can stop abortion in the state of Ohio. That's how devious things have gotten. So that's what we're doing here. And there's a card back there if you want to take a card, and there's some literature that explains it. There's other complications. Right now, to amend the Ohio Constitution, you have to have 5% of the people who voted in the last election in 44 counties. There are 88 counties in Ohio, so at least half the counties have to say they want to have a constitutional amendment vote. They've changed this in this bill to be all 88 counties. So if you take Adams County or some of the counties in southeast Ohio down in Appalachia, where hardly anybody votes anyway, and if they do, they're conservative, there's no way that anybody is going to get 5% of every county to say they want to have this constitutional amendment. So they pretty much stacked the deck. I'm not sure I understand their thinking, because that also means no conservative can put their ideas on the ballot either. So it's not going to pass in the more populated counties. So But they're short-sighted and narrow-minded and focused on one thing, and that's eliminating abortion. Okay, our flower was no flower. They may know what that is. Caladium. Caladium.
Maybe.
What's that?
Maybe caladium?
It is a caladium.
Oh, it is.
Well, that's what I figured it was. Shade plant, multicolored, they're fun to grow, so that's our flower for today. What else? Oh, Board of Education, we're on all politics today. The legislature in Ohio has passed the Board of Education amendment. From now on, the Board of Education that's elected by the voters has control of teacher discipline. Every other aspect of the Board of Education, curriculum, what goes on where, any complaints, any additions or subtractions, is done by a person appointed by the governor. That person gets $100 and some thousand a year. The two assistants get another $100 and some thousand a year. So they have circumvented the actual elected Board of Election or Board of Education, and Mike has talked about this many times, and put it into something that the Republican Party can control individually. Whatever they want will pass automatically now because the governor is going to appoint this person. So that's the end of my politicking for today. Any other announcements? Oh, movie. In 2 weeks, if anybody would be in favor of seeing a movie and having a little snack after the church service, I'll probably go ahead and set that up. You're welcome to come. If not, I like the movie. I'll watch it. So.
What's the movie?
The movie is Tomorrowland. If you're aware of Tomorrowland, George Clooney, I talked a little bit about it last week. Tomorrowland takes place in the future. The world is going to hell in a handbasket. And it turns out there is a group of billionaires that have created a place in the future where they have electric cars, they have flying cars, everything is better in the future. But for some reason, nobody wants to adopt that. And George Clooney as a little child, was basically you get a little key that guides you to get in. And he found this key and went there and was exposed to it and then wanted to take part in it. And it's kind of the story of the mad scientist who decided to destroy the world. And then it's a hopeful movie. It ends with the hope that the world can be changed. The whole point of it is, and the little saying they bring out is, the wolf is in the woods, and it depends on what you feed the wolf as to whether you have good or bad. If the wolf is fed good, then things get better. If you feed the wolf bad and negative things, then the world is negative. And at the present time in this movie, the wolf is being fed only negative news. And the reason I'm showing this and the reason it resonates with me is we're pretty much in a time of bad news right now. We need to start feeding the wolf some good news.
I'll put a notice in the El Dorado Weekly News.
What's that?
I'll put a notice about this in the El Dorado
Yes.
in case anyone would want to come, although I think that's the Sunday when Kathy Brawley, their retired pastor, is going to be back in town, so I'm not sure.
Well,
People might choose Kathy.
everybody's welcome to come up and have a snack.
Yep.
We don't have a big layout, but we basically use what do they call it, the hot cooker, the instant cooker. It takes like 2 minutes. Yes.
Is this the same Sunday that the congregational meeting is?
I think is that next Sunday?
No, that's in 2 weeks.
That's the third.
The 23rd.
Yeah.
Let's look and see. I hope I have that in my calendar or not.
Yeah.
And your meeting is the 23rd. Yep. Yeah, we can't do it then, though. And next week is too soon. So how about we'll do it the 30th? I'll announce it again as we go.
Okay.
30th?
The 30th. Yeah, the one after annual meeting.
Okay.
Although I may have the snacks for annual meeting. Because that hot cooker, I mean, you just stick them in there and it heats them up in no time at all, and they're pretty good. You get tired of donuts. Okay, our welcome is we have Derek with us. I'm always glad to have Derek, and glad that and appreciative that El Dorado has released him. He is talking about thinking. So our PowerPoint is everything is on thinking. Go back to, and that's what I guess I'll show you this one just for the fun of it. Midvale School for the Gifted. This is how important critical thinking is to you. When the door says pull and you're trying to push the door to get in, Okay, 459. This is the mission of our faith, to teach the fragile art of hospitality, to revere both the critical mind and the generous heart, to prove that diversity need not mean divisiveness, and to witness to all that we must hold the whole world in our hands. William Schultz. And our prelude.
Prelude is I Remember Spring.
slightly melancholy tune for slightly melancholy times. I want to thank Roberta and Lloyd. Music makes worship, or at least for me it does, and we would be lost without their contributions, so thank you. Chalice lighting. I did this, I don't know, a couple weeks ago or last week sometime, but I think it's appropriate again today. Chalice lighting for a service on the separation of church and state by Tracy Bleakney. The flame burns for those who seek and defend the right to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, so that each person may live according to their conscience in a democratically elected society. This flame also burns for the defenders of freedom, working against those who would impose their own religious beliefs on others through intimidation or legislation. May we tend this fire always ever vigilant and courageous in the struggle for freedom and justice for all. Opening hymn is 209, O Come, You Longing, Thirsty Souls. Say, thorns and nettles have a place. They have a duty to perform, and they do it well. Right. Our affirmation, these are two quotes on thinking. Thomas Edison said, 5% of the people think, 10% of the people think they think, the other 85% would rather die than think. And Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. The power of positive thinking. Right. Joys and concerns. We still have our sunflowers for Ukraine. The counterattack is going slowly. The Russians are still bombing civilian targets in towns. I think 12 or 13 was the last count on the last town that was bombed or missile attacked. Like an apartment complex, 11-story building, they blew off the top of the building. not much else has changed. We are sending supposedly cluster munitions. If you're aware of cluster bombs, it's one big bomb that drops a lot of little bombs, and sometimes the little bombs don't go off, and then people find them days later, weeks later, months later, or years later, and are hurt by them. So many nations have outlawed those. They were used in Vietnam, and lots of kids would find them in a field, or farmers would trip over them when they were plowing their fields, and there would be death and destruction. But in Ukraine, this has gone on for 500 days now, and they're running out of supplies. So I think what's happened is they say if we don't use this, we won't have anything. So, and the Ukrainians have promised not to send these munitions in civilian areas. It only goes where there's Russian troops. So they have guidelines. So you'll have to make up your own decision on that. Anything else? Yes.
Like I have a candle lit for my in-laws. A number of you know that my father-in-law has been in a lengthy decline from dementia. And talking to my mother-in-law, and he's had another significant step down in his health and functioning. And generally, that there's never a step back up.
Yeah.
And so now the family's having to think about what are the other options for his care if he gets to the point where mobility in the retirement community condo is increasingly a problem, or if he just stops following prompts. Because he doesn't, there's a number of things he doesn't do unless he's prompted to, including eating, drinking water, coming in off the patio. They live in Arizona.
Yeah.
So.
These are difficult times, and they will not get easier. In my time in nursing, particularly when I started out in a nursing home, one of the saddest things is, and I hope he is freed and does not have to deal with this, or the family doesn't have to, Alzheimer's can also change your personality. This one gentleman was a big guy. He was very strong. He was probably in his 60s. He was in the prime of his life physically, but Alzheimer's had affected him deeply, and he became a really angry, difficult, physically violent person. And trying to give him a shower, there was only 2 male aides there and a lot of female aides, and it took like 5 or 6 of us to get him into the shower, strapped onto a bed, and get him cleaned up. And there were pictures in his room of him with his family, his grandkids, on cruises, just the happiest smile on his face, the nicest guy. And this disease has changed him 100%.
We've been fortunate. My father-in-law tended to have a bit of a temper, but as the dementia has progressed, he's actually become strangely passive.
So it's worked the other direction.
Yeah, but we've been lucky because I don't know that he could have been taken care of in the retirement community condo if he was acting out.
It's difficult. I mean, and physical restraint, and that's what they end up. You don't do physical restraint, you do chemical restraint. There are medications you can give people that makes a zombie, just makes you basically a lump that sits there. But that's better than having to physically restrain them. There is some hope. Once again, it's a tempered hope. If you saw the news last night or the night before, there is a new treatment approved for Alzheimer's, IV treatment. I think it's once a week. $28,000 a year, but it is approved for Medicare. The downside is, at least from my perspective, $28,000 a year, and they asked the scientist, the creator, the medical attendant, what's the prognosis for this? And he said it maintains where you are for 6 months. So it stops the progression of the disease for 6 months. So if you start it early enough, you can maintain some quality of life at least for 6 months. But think, it's $28,000 for 6 months. And all this is, I'm sure they try to quantify it with scientific study, but you know how hard it is to quantify quality of life, particularly for someone who can't answer back and tell you. I always get a chuckle out of the brain commercials you see constantly at the evening news, because the only people that watch the evening news are old people like me who are affected by loss of memory and loss of concentration. and supposedly you take this miracle pill, and you know, I think like a 20-year-old now, and it's really helped me. And so my question is, how do you know it's helped you? I mean, it's a subjective thing, and they just told you it helped you. So, okay. Anything else? Oh, I want to light a candle. That's for Alzheimer's. Let's write another one for that anyway. Candle for my wife is back from a week at annual conference, Church of the Brethren in Cincinnati. All churches, as you know, are going through difficult times. Attendance is dropping. She has some real difficulties. She is, I forget what the name of her little group that she shepherds is, but what they do is quilt. She's been a sewer her whole life. So each church that wishes to can contribute their own quilt block, and if you've seen our quilt back here, it's exactly what that is. Each church contributes their own quilt block with the church's name and whatever their thought is. Then at the annual conference, they sit at a big table, all the ladies sit, and they sew these quilts together to make a quilt, and then they sew a backing on it, and then they sell it at an auction to raise money for the church. And many times people will buy the quilt and then give it back to the thing, and they will sell it again, so a quilt might be sold 2 or 3 times. This year, there were fewer people sewing, and the people that were there were older and not as able to sew, so she had to go out to the car. She always brings a backup sewing machine and bring her own sewing machine in and sew the backing on the quilt to sell it. And then instead of selling it for $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 and having it donated back, the quilts were selling for $250 or $300. So she's not sure whether that's a diminishment in income, a diminishment in the number of people there, diminishment in interest, but she was a little discouraged when she got back after all the work that they had done to raise money and raised like a quarter of what they usually raise at annual conference. So a candle which went out, which is a bad symbol, for the Church of the Brethren, and all churches, not only our church, their church, but every church, and we've seen that even here where the Methodist Church is now alternating with another Methodist church. It's happening to everybody. So thoughts and prayers for all those people. And one more, anything else? One more candle for those concerns he had. I guess we'll light a candle for Cecil too. I'll see if I can call her or get a hold of her and find out what's going on. I may go down and visit her this week. One more candle for those, I guess those people we haven't heard from. Maybe we can hear from them in the future. If you have any concerns, anybody you're concerned about, let us know and we will try to deal with that. All right, our children's story is on, guess what? Critical thinking. If it plays.
Socrates, one of the founding fathers of Western philosophical thought, was on trial. Many Athenians believed he was a dangerous enemy of the state, accusing the philosopher of corrupting the youth and refusing to recognize their gods. However, Socrates wasn't feared for claiming to have all the answers, but rather for asking too many questions. While he loathed formal lectures, the philosopher frequently engaged friends and strangers in lengthy conversations about morality and society. These discussions weren't debates, nor would Socrates offer explicit advice. In fact, the philosopher often claimed to know nothing at all, responding to his partner's answers only with further questions. But through this process, Socrates probed their logic, revealing its flaws and helping both parties reach a more robust understanding. These insightful questions made Socrates beloved by his followers. 2 of his students, Plato and Xenophon, were so inspired that they replicated their mentor's process in fictional dialogues. These invented exchanges provide perfect examples of what would come to be known as the Socratic method. In one of these fabricated dialogues, Socrates is conversing with a young man named Euthydemus, who is confident that he understands the nature of justice and injustice. Socrates probes the student's values by asking him to label actions such as lying and theft as just or unjust. Euthydemus confidently categorizes them as injustices, but this only prompts another question. Is it just for a general to deceive or pillage a hostile army? Euthydemus revises his assertion. He claims that these actions are just when done to enemies, and unjust when done to friends. But Socrates isn't finished. He asks the young man to consider a commander lying to his troops to boost their morale. Before long, Euthydemus is despondent. It seems that every answer leads to further problems, and perhaps he's not quite sure what constitutes justice after all. In employing this question-oriented approach, Socrates described himself as a midwife, whose inquiries assist others in giving birth to their ideas. His method of questioning draws out an individual's unexamined assumptions and then challenges those biases. It doesn't always provide definitive answers, but the method helps clarify the questions and eliminate contradictory or circular logic. And by following a line of inquiry where it logically leads, both the question asker and answerer can end up in unexpected places. This technique isn't limited by the conversation's content, making it incredibly useful in numerous fields. During the Renaissance, the method was used to teach clinical medicine. Students proposed their rationale for different diagnoses, while a doctor questioned their assumptions and moderated discussion. In this model, the method could even produce conclusive results. This same approach was later used in other sciences, such as astronomy, botany, and mathematics. Following the Protestant Reformation, it was adapted to tackle abstract questions of faith. In the 19th century, the method became an essential part of American legal education. Professors explored students' understanding of judicial reasoning by challenging them with unforeseen hypothetical situations. This approach is still used today by the Supreme Court to imagine the unintended impacts of passing law. The Socratic method can be adapted to teach almost any topic that relies on critical reasoning, but its success depends on the teacher employing it. An effective Socratic educator must be well-versed in their subject. Rather than bullying their students or showing off their superior intellect, they should be modest, genuinely curious, and affirming of every contribution. In this regard, Socrates himself may not have been the most subtle Socratic teacher. Historians believe he was deeply critical of Athens' particular brand of democracy and known to pass those concerns on to his followers. These subversive beliefs were distorted in public forums and thought to have inspired two of his pupils to treasonous ends. It was likely for these ideas Socrates was brought to trial and eventually sentenced to death. But even on his deathbed, artists depict a serene philosopher, ever curious to explore the ultimate question. What was life like in Socrates' Athens? Travel back in time to 427 BCE and experience how an ancient democracy made its decisions.
Is the Supreme Court still using the Socratic method? I think we've turned the corner into bullying, as the narrator was talking about. All right, any questions, comments? Our philosopher in residence?
Critical thinking in philosophy is considered to be informal logic. There's logic, inductive and deductive logic, that's formal. Critical thinking is considered to be informal. And I've studied it, and I've got books at home on it, whole books on it, and all the different little techniques that you use. It is actually different from inductive and deductive logic.
This is what Mike has talked to us many times, and this is what the Board of Education has tried to instill and is now being thwarted in that. Critical thinking is being dismissed in Ohio education, actually in education, K through 12 education throughout the nation. That is one of the things, in my personal opinion, that the people who want to manipulate public opinion are trying to eliminate is the ability of students to do critical thinking. They want students to believe what they are told, and they want them told what they want them to believe. Not to think and understand what they want to believe, but only what they are told to believe. So we'll see where that goes to. All right, Pastor Derek, rethink how we think. And this is our little quote: stop regurgitating uncited memes and start using some damn critical thinking. I'm not sure Benjamin Franklin actually said that.
The irony is it's an uncited meme.
Yes.
Complaining about uncited memes.
Yes. But if Benjamin Franklin said it, I'm for it.
Well, it's always good to be back in the pulpit at New Madison. When I first come up the staircase to the church, one of the things I love hearing is the piano being practiced. Hear the music notes wafting out the doors as I'm walking up. And it tells me that there is life here, and that is a good thing to hear. Thank you as well to the El Dorado congregation for giving me the freedom to come up here and be of service in New Madison. To introduce today's message, I have a very short reading. It is a quotation from the 19th century Baptist preacher Charles Spurgeon, who once wrote, "Anxiety does not empty tomorrow of its sorrows, but only empties today of its strength." Anxiety does not empty tomorrow of its sorrows, but only empties today of its strength. So, we need to rethink how we think about doing church. We need to rethink how we think about doing church. I have heard this over and over again since the time I was in seminary 20 years ago. And you've probably heard it too somewhere, because it's the theme or title for different conferences, for a great many books, denominational initiatives. The faith community that we are part of, both Unitarian and Universalist, is one where our ability to think about religious life is important to our spiritual journey. Thinking carefully is one of the tools that we use to navigate the journey together. And yes, so many of the innovations that have blessed our society were born out of a sense that we needed to think more innovatively than we did in the past. Democracy is an innovation of thought. So is the abolition of slavery or the advent of penicillin. All these things, an innovation of thought at some point in the creation of these. Thinking and imagination are great things, and they are necessary to the life of faith. The ability to hope beyond present realities, to think about what else might be, and the tenacity to do something different. These things are miraculous in their own way. A question then: if constant rethinking about how we do church is so critical to our faith, why are people so often bad at it? There is an African-American preacher and blogger, so a contemporary preacher and blogger, named Solomon Missouri, which sounds like a made-up Hollywood name, but he's a real human being. He put it out there like this: y'all tell us to reimagine church, but most of the time, it's just church with skinny jeans. And I hate to admit it, but I think his absurd criticism is often right. I think of all of the churches, for example, in the years from 2000 to 2010, who were wringing their hands about how they could attract more Gen Xers like me. And so they put coffee bars in the back of their church. Or there's always the endless parade of churches that spend actually a good amount of money to rebrand themselves by paying advertising experts for the design of new logos, jingles, and mottos. Most of the time, these efforts accomplish little to nothing. If the challenge of rethinking church could be summed up in 6 words, it might as well be, it's just church with skinny jeans. Yes, religious community in North America is a mess. As Tim has mentioned, churches of all kinds see fewer and fewer people participating. And that's not just us, or the Methodists, or the Church of the Brethren. The Southern Baptist Church has been in decline for the last 20 years. They don't mention it. They're too busy policing whether a female gets in the pulpit. Yes, religious community in North America is a bit of a mess, and we need to rethink things, but I've also come to see that we also need to rethink how we think. Because all too often the thinking we are told to use involves corporate buzzwords like synergy, leverage, core competence, or my least favorite, market share. And this is because so many of our conferences, books, and denominational initiatives are taking their cues from big business and capitalism, with a little thin shellac of theology spread out on top. Now, this is where I'm going to be completely honest to admit that I have gone to some of these conferences, and I have read some of these books, and I have sometimes benefited from learning from the business world. It's not all a tool of the devil. But the languages and the practices we've often been told to use when thinking about what is new or what is next are quite often transliterations of text and practices that have values and ends vastly different from ours as a community of faith that is inclusive, open thinking, and generous. For example, what is the new thing we are called to do? Now, if I had a nickel for every time that I have heard the Steve Jobs Apple computer story in some faith context to illustrate how much the church needs to innovate, I would actually have enough money to buy a new iPhone. Yeah, you know what I mean. But what is foundational about the philosophy of the Apple Corporation is the idea of things, it becomes very dangerous when this gets carried over to people, are only as valuable as the profit they create for us, and that we need to always be looking for a way to trade up to something better. And when something no longer has all of the latest bells and whistles, you leave it behind, or you get left behind with it. That is the Apple corporate philosophy. Practically speaking, they wouldn't have said it in that many words. Even the best translations of this into faith communities has potential for danger. Do we really need a constant disruption in the values that we nurture in one another? Should, for example, religious traditions that value meditation, should they stop meditating because market surveys say meditation is boring? I kid you not, the Quaker church I previously served hired one of these consulting firms that told the Quakers, that silence bit, it's boring. Get a praise band. People will love it.
Did they?
They did not.
Thank
God. It was a bridge too far, but they thought about it.
Jeez.
They thought about it. So is the problem that we haven't innovated enough? It's just quantity of innovation? Or is the real problem in our thinking that we have not innovated in the right way? Like many people who still value religious life, and it's a smaller chunk of the population than it used to be, I long to be part of a spiritual community that is embodying love in the world. A community that embodies Moses' thirst for liberty. A people shaped by the ethics of Jesus. A place where the compassion of the Buddha is made manifest. But I don't want to do it in a way that merely is approved of by Apple or Twitter, but which Moses, Jesus, and the Buddha would not approve of. We've already lost, and by we I mean religious communities in general, we've already lost so many people. Their hands, their giftedness, their voices, they're part of what I would call the image of God that we all carry. We have lost them to betrayals and alienation. And what have we gotten for so many of our recent efforts? What we have gotten quite often are people who still feel ignored, still feel unheard, and feel treated like they are commodities. But you know, there's a really hip coffee bar at the back of the church. Merchandise with new branded logos, as well as a light show and fog machine. I'm not joking. I could probably find a church with an easy drive up here that's got a light show and a fog machine. Some of us in churches like this speak about walking into the broken parts of our communities with the spiritual gift and power of love. In our less functional thinking sometimes, we don't usually examine ourselves for those parts of ourselves that might be a bit broken. We don't contemplate if our presence is simply spreading around some kind of dysfunction that we carry. We talk about the wisdom we bring, but less about the wisdom we need, quite possibly from others we have not yet met. We need to frame innovation that isn't fixated on newness of things or novelty, but which instead seeks out the right and ethical fit. Not so much a cookie-cutter solution, but deep listening, reflection, truth-telling, and collaboration. These are the kinds of innovation we need. Innovation in deep listening, innovation in reflection, innovation in truth-telling, and in collaboration. The truth is that most of our faith communities have something that we need to stop doing at some point before we even begin thinking about doing something new.
And that's why so many of the open and affirming churches in our culture seem so radical to the wider society, because they aren't installing the coffee bar. And they're not re-logoing their merchandise. They are taking the chains off the temple door that already opens into sacred space. And they're asking themselves, who have we not invited in? Because deep down, it's not about finding the new pastor, or the new program, or the new tech that will make us relevant. Even though some of those things can be helpful. I can promise you, though, that most people today can see right through most of the hip church sleight of hand. They know when they're being marketed to. We need to find new ways to journey deeper on our spiritual path, new ways to find faithful paths forward that do not leave people behind. In West Africa, there is this philosophy that is called Sankofa, summed up in a proverb from Ghana. It is not taboo to fetch what is in danger of being left behind. It is not taboo to fetch what is in danger of being left behind. And maybe we will listen to great prophets and religious teachers and the ethical ideal of humankind. Maybe we'll worry a little bit less. I'm not going to promise you we won't worry at all, but maybe a little bit less. Because worrying routinely, when it's allowed to flourish, causes organizations to do things that are careless instead of faithful. And perhaps that is what will guide us, a kind of faithfulness to one another, to the people around us, to humanity in general, to our higher power. And perhaps we will actually be spiritual community one to another. And I want you to think about that. I concluded right on time. Because I want to hear you. You're thinking, you're pondering. I want to listen to you. And I know you want to listen one to another. Margaret, you're itching.
Yeah, you saw me squirming a lot, didn't you?
Just a little.
All that marketing crap is like bringing up nightmares from my career in commercial art and marketing. And I think all of that stuff is telling you what to think and what to desire. But maybe each church could think more about what they are and what they have to offer. I don't know if I'm making that point clear, but it's kind of like what we offer is very different than what a church down the road offers. I don't know what's around
No,
here.
but this is distinct. What is offered in this house of worship is distinct.
Yeah.
How often are you going to be anywhere in Dark County and hear somebody, preacher or layperson from the pulpit, put a quote from St. Paul and a quote from the Buddha in dialogue with one another? How often are we going to raise the question, gosh, Why is this special election coming? What's that about? In August? I live in Indiana and I've heard about it. There's a critical thinking here. Like, so it was wrong to hold a special election in August because it cost too much, but now it's right. Why?
Because only the committed will show up, and that is the challenge.
But you know, but so many people go through life and there'll be advertising telling people what they should want, what they should desire, even trying to convince them what's best for them.
That's a key point right there, is that, okay, I was raised real strict Catholic, and my parents lived their whole lives that way and died that way. Patrick and I have conversations about this frequently. There are some very good things that I've kept from my Catholic upbringing, and some very bad things. But each church could think about and converse about what is good and relevant for today that they already have. We have a lot of things in this Unitarian church that are very relevant for today.
Yeah.
But do we go out and preach on the street corners and just get in everybody's face that our way is the right way? No, because our way is right for us. It could be right for some other people that are out there. The same way that my parents' Catholic faith was right for them.
And it's not bad to communicate.
Yeah.
That thing's communicating right now. It's strategic.
Yeah.
Hopefully. It's strategic.
They all have something that is right for segments of the population. And when you talk about all these different religions, the bottom line is acceptance, love. You know, those are things that are in common with many of them.
It's a little bit like the Rabbi Hillel saying, like he was asked, Jesus cribbed this later on. Rabbi Hillel was asked by a student, well, how can I sum up all the law and the prophets? And Hillel said, you can do that standing on one foot. Love God, love your neighbor, everything else is commentary. You can picture Hillel standing like this. It takes that long. But it takes humility. I don't think a lot of you appreciate the humility that we bring to our space when we really engage in deep dialogue, deep listening, truth-telling. There aren't a lot of spaces that are willing to practice these things. To try and hold more than one perspective at the same time. Even if you might choose one over the other, or come up with a third option that we hadn't thought of yet.
What's really important is open dialogue. I mean, look at the challenges that your church is faced with, and that can be any faith, any church. Like, look what we were faced with recently, with an influx of people with a new idea and a new way of living. I don't think we responded very well. And it bothers me, but I'm going to have to learn from it.
it takes practice
Yeah,
to
it's
learn
hard.
how to speak and listen. It also takes patience, because when we are in community with people who are new to our community, it takes time for them to pick up the practice. I have heard some stories told by folks here about some of the things that took place, and while disappointing, it's still something to learn from. And I hope that those who packed up and left maybe learned something as well. I know some of it was about sort of the pagan-Christian divide, which I always find interesting, because when people ask me, was Christmas pagan or Christian? My answer is yes.
Right.
Those things are leaking into each other in Christmas and Easter and a whole bunch of other things. When we try to make the lines bright and say it has to be all one way or the other, often we turn a blind eye to the places where there is interchange of ideas. And frankly, I kind of like the hybrid paganish Christian Christmas. Do you know what Christmas was like in Puritan Boston? There was nothing going on. It was a day on a calendar. There was nothing special about that day. They'll read the Bible story, and that's it. That's what happened in Puritan Boston. No celebrations, no songs, no gift giving. Life, blah, blah, blah.
I could say more, but I won't.
We could say more afterward. Are all hearts and minds free to continue?
Yes.
I was at the Democratic Farmers, is what they call the Democratic Farmers of Dark County breakfast Saturday morning. It's one Saturday every month. Everyone is welcome to attend. $5 at Jack's Cabin. Buys you whatever breakfast you want. You can buy the $11 breakfast for $5. And somebody was asking about churches, and they asked me about the UU church in New Madison and how to describe it. And I use that old UU saw. You won't hear the name Jesus Christ invoked many times, primarily when someone, a parishioner, trips going down the basement stairs and drops their contribution to the dinner. They thought that was pretty humorous for them. All right, our offering, as is usual. Let's see. We did the fish. Was this the first Sunday? No, last Sunday was the first Sunday. We did fish last Sunday.
Second Sunday.
Yeah, we did fish last Sunday, didn't we? Yeah, okay. All right, if you need something, take something. If you are able to contribute, please do. gaps in the line, but I pray that we are still moving forward. All right, our extinguishing the chalice is number 456. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Elizabeth Sell joins. All right, postlude. Another melancholy ending. That is, what's the name?
Summertime.
Summertime, yes. All right. I recognize the tune, I just can't pull the name up. That ends our service in New Madison. There's coffee, well, there will be. Jazz and what's her name are not here, so they didn't bring theirs, but I'll put the coffee on. There's ice cubes, there's lemonade already pre-mixed, and there's also lemonade in the bottle if you want that. There's leftover 4th of July sweets, and there are donuts from Kroger. So our between your ears photograph is somebody riding their horse to the drive-up window and getting their coffee or whatever the snack is. And there was a little video of the horse with his head inside the window and the little girl, the girl at the window talking to the horse. I couldn't figure out how to get it live, but that is the funniest thing I've ever seen. She was just chatting away with the horse whose head was inside the window. I'm sure the health department would have had something to say about that.
The guy at the drive-through booth looks pretty happy to see the horse.